My name's James Huggins. I'm the co-founder of a studio in London. We're a game developer, primarily. We make apps, games, interactive websites for kids. We make our own games as well as games for clients. We've worked for companies like Penguin, Disney, Nickelodeon, DreamWorks, a lot of entertainment clients, but we also started out making a lot of educational apps and games for kids. So without really knowing the mix of the audience, of the dwindling audience, if you guys could just stick up your hand if you are involved with making educational games as a sort of commercial enterprise, as a company in some way. And for anyone else, this is the challenge, obviously, of doing a talk, is not knowing who's in the audience. And my preferred way to try and say something of value and interest in terms of our experience is to tell you the story of the company that we set up. My background is in visual effects, computer graphics for film and TV. So I started off, I studied philosophy and psychology at Edinburgh University because I thought it would be interesting for no other reason. While I was at uni, I started dabbling with making interactive websites, Flash websites, things like that. And it led me very naturally into visual effects. That company was actually a visual effects school that recently I learned was was acquired by Pearson. So I've always been involved with technology. I've always been involved in its education. And actually, about 5 years ago, started having a family myself, and it really kind of brought me face to face with the offering for kids, particularly young kids, preschool-age children, for educational games. Now, this is very much kind of before the explosion in apps, and certainly we started Made in Me before there was an iPad. And it's still amazing to me to think that, 5 years ago, 5 or certainly 6 years ago, there was no such thing as an iPad. So I thought to myself, well, it's really interesting. I found a lot of stuff out there for kids, a lot of educational games. But as most of you know, and it's still the case, although it's improving, educational games tended to statistically just be, from an entertainment perspective, quite poor. So when I was looking for stuff for my kids, there would be entertainment activities and games and websites that had characters that they liked, and there was a lot of fun in them, and the learning was pretty shallow and fairly non-existent. Then you had the educational games, which a lot of them looked like they'd been made kind of 20 years ago, and didn't seem to, they had a lot of the learning, the pedagogy was very interesting, but actually the execution was not. Now these days it's obviously, it's changed dramatically, but we started Made in Me on the simple and fairly obvious premise that you could combine these two things together, and it gave rise to all sorts of words like, edutainment and things like that. But ultimately, it just comes down to making a good game that's actually fulfilling the criteria. And obviously, the thing about game-based learning is that there's learning in every single game. Ever, even non-digital ones, traditional ones. It's just about learning a set of rules that you then apply to reach some sort of specific goal. So what I want to do today is I'm going to show you in actual projects that we've done, the kind of a potted history of our company, and some of the challenges that we've been through. And they are creative in nature, but also commercial. I think it's something that's less often talked about when you're at conferences, which is the sort of the creative, was the innovation and the interactive and the actual products and what the products are trying to do. But of course, for a commercial company, for a commercial enterprise, not only is actually the game being bought or essentially used part of your objective for the company as a commercial thing, but obviously you want whatever you make to be used by as many possible people. In our case, we want as many kids as possible to have access to the stuff we make. So let's see if this works. It's 5 lessons, and this is not like one of those things where I profess to tell you things you don't already know. It's certainly just 5 things I now know that maybe I knew before intellectually, but I didn't profoundly understand in the way I do now, by virtue of having made some mistakes along the way, and our own kind of learning journey as a company. The first one is, everyone's heard the phrase "content is king," and this is something that I contest. It always gets a conversation going in the pub when you say to people, you know, content is king. No, it isn't. I love content. We're a content company in large part. Good content is essential. But as with the previous talk, you can see very much that without any consideration, or with some consideration given to how your content is actually going to get to an audience, then it doesn't matter how good the content is. The first lesson we learned was on our first project. It was something that we did as a studio ourselves. It's called The Land of Me, and it's an interactive world for preschoolers. Which basically, I mean, interactive world sounds quite grand, but it was essentially like if you were to have a picture book, like an illustrated world full of stories and characters that you could actually go into and reach inside, and you could change and manipulate, and if you changed words, it would change the outcomes. And it was very much a digital interactive toy for preschoolers to play with that was trying to support early literacy and language development. And when we started, we were completely obsessed from a content perspective. We're like, the only thing we need to worry about is we need to make this thing the best possible product we can. So we spoke to early years educators, professors, experts from Oxford and Cambridge. We did work with loads of nursery settings and schools, and we created essentially a framework within which we then brought all of our knowledge about entertainment, creating interactive experiences, animation, illustration, storytelling. And we brought all these things together in what was a sizable undertaking, hugely satisfying from a creative perspective. And we made something that we were immensely proud of. And I'm just going to show you a quick video of The Land of Me so that you can see what I'm talking about.
Welcome to the Land of Me, a world of creativity and learning for adventurers aged 2 and above. The Land of Me is an interactive early learning experience quite unlike anything you've seen before. Buddy Boo and Willow.
Wake up, you lazy lot. Let's go adventuring.
And journey through 6 stunning chapters. Together you'll make monsters, alter environments, construct buildings, choreograph dances, compose music, tell stories and more. The Land of Me is alive. Spot changes in the weather. Watch as day turns to night. Disturb the wildlife in the background. Or just observe as the characters drift off to sleep. Designed by child development experts to nurture creativity, language and a healthy imagination, The Land of Me encourages you to play together. Continue the adventure away from the screen with over 100 printable activities. Where the story goes from here is up to you.
So that was, eventually, actually, after we launched it, it wasn't for Ladybird, but we ended up partnering with Ladybird after we launched the product. We found a lot of common ground with them in the UK, and obviously their interest in the preschool market. And so you can, at least I heard from that you get a sense of how much effort and care was taken in terms of creating the product. And indeed, that was borne out by its reception. It was used in thousands of settings. It was actually used, there was quite a lot of interest just from families, from people downloading it for kids at home. And it was piloted in about 20,000 schools in the UK. It was BAFTA nominated. It won awards at BET. It was one of those things where it did everything that we really wanted it to do, apart from make any money. So what was interesting about that is, we learned the first lesson, which is it doesn't matter how good the content is if you haven't thought about how to actually get it to market. So, it's about audience, it's about platform. Now, a lot of educational games, like Amplify that was being talked about before, obviously they are the platform. And I've got lots of friends who work at companies who are creating content for them. In the UK, there's the BBC, and obviously you have people like Pearson, and there are big platforms and for distribution to get actual content into educational settings, particularly with schools. But I think what's really interesting to note is a lot of the stuff that's talked about or at this conference, but also generally speaking, as to having a very profound impact in terms of games and game-based learning, are not games that were designed for schools. So, for example, Minecraft has been mentioned. Khan Academy, obviously, these are things that yes, they are used by schools, and they have an educational ambition, but they aren't designed to be sold to schools necessarily. And a lot of educational games companies that I know, and us with The Land of Me, we were very much targeting schools as customers, local authorities, and organizations that would want to actually buy this and help us distribute it into schools. And we ran up against the commercial challenges of actually accessing that market effectively without either a huge amount of resource or a partner an incumbent who already has that network established. But even then, as we did, we found that it was incredibly difficult. And so I think that with hindsight, what we got right is we got the product right, and we got a lot of the actual route to market side of things wrong. And we underestimated really the challenges in getting even a great product that everyone who uses it says they love to actually have any kind of real traction in the marketplace. And this is another one. Again, these are all, when I reread them, a lot of them are fortune cookie cliches. But like I say, this is all stuff that everyone knows intuitively, and I probably did as well. But the first two projects, The Land of Me, that first one there, and this is how I benchmark them. It's not the only benchmark, but it's just funny because The Land of Me and the next project I'm going to show you is a project called Sneak. They were both BAFTA nominated in the UK. The Land of Me probably costs us about £600,000 or £700,000, all in. It was 18 months of work. It was a team of about 10 people, a huge undertaking, and we really piled everything at it. The project that I'm about to show you, Sneak, and admittedly, it's not actually an educational game per se. But it is a game for kids. It's a kids app, and it requires you to physically sneak up on your device. So the way that it works is you choose some bait from a little bait shop at the beginning of the game, and you put your iPad or iPhone or device down, and then you need to move away from it, and you need to be quiet. And if you wait long enough, these little creatures come out onto the screen and start eating the food that you've left for them. And then you need to actually sneak back to the device and tap the screen in order to photograph the creature. If you make noise, the microphone will detect it. If you actually if you're too loud, too grumpy, the accelerometer on the device, basically it detects vibration with an incredible sensitivity that you wouldn't believe. And the camera is obviously detecting motion as well. So by imbuing, using the device's sensors, you can imbue these creatures with sort of real-life characteristics. And what happens is a game that is played outside of the technology, which you can see there at the end of The Land of Me, we had printable activities, and it was kind of the beginning of us trying to explore more how digital experiences could actually create and foster real-world play scenarios. So I'll show you this next one, which this game we did in-house. It took us about 5 weeks to develop and probably cost £2,000 or £3,000. But it also got a BAFTA nomination. In fact, it was more expensive for us to actually get tickets to go to the BAFTAs than it was to create the app in the first place.
Welcome, young friend, to the strange world of Sneak, where beasties live most bizarre and unique. The aim of this game is to take the best snap of the beasties lured out by the bait in your trap. Silently sneak.
The other one is a little bit more tricky.
Shh.
Richard
Be still.
touched upon it also. The leak in Apple iCloud. Private pictures from celebrities leaked out. And of course, that's one of the challenges for cloud.
To see such excellent sneaking brings a tear to my eye.
So there's lots of different creatures you can sneak up on. I mean, that one I think is there as an example of a simple idea. Now, it could have been even simpler than that, right? It could have literally just been like a buzzer or a light and using the devices in different ways. And I think a lot of what we're doing now as a studio is we're trying to find ways that are of really kind of inspiring and engaging kids with an experience that feels very familiar, but at the same time trying to use as little effort. And the nice thing about kids, and someone mentioned earlier that the scary thing about kids is they're brutally honest. I actually think that's the nice thing about kids. Designing for kids, doesn't matter what anyone says, is easier. Because designing for kids is basically about pure intuition. If it makes sense from a design perspective, then kids generally get it. The problem with grown-ups, adults, grown-ups, is that a lot of what your design have to accommodate is the way we're used to doing things, which aren't necessarily the most intuitive. One example of that, just quickly, is in another app we have called MeBooks, which is essentially an ebook platform, children's ebook platform, which I'll show you in a bit. The gesture, a very sort of like natural gesture to close something is to swipe up. And actually, this has been borne out by the latest iOS updates, where now to close apps, you double tap the home screen and you just kind of flick them away. And it was so funny watching people kind of encounter that, including myself, for the first time. I double tap the home button, and then you see the apps displayed, and you're like, how do I close them? And there's no like little X, no little sort of classic close button. I watched my, at the time, 5-year-old son. And he came over, and I swear to you, the first thing he did was just basically go like that and flick it away. And I was like, okay, cool, thanks. Because basically we've kind of, a lot of the things we've done, we've sort of forgotten intuition, and we're relying on habits that we've learned over the last 20 years of interacting with technology that are kind of silly. I mean, a mouse, when you have touchscreen devices, a mouse is the most ludicrous thing you can possibly imagine. So I think that, from looking at something like Sneak, it was like, okay, simple is the best. And you only need to create the tiniest foil, and then kids, particularly kids, they'll kind of rally around it and really engage with it.
Today's presentation,
and this, funny enough, this app has created as much of as much interest and as much buzz and press noise and stuff as The Land of Me probably did. When you look at the respective efforts involved, it kind of makes me cry a little bit inside. But obviously, they are very different things. sometimes you can't,
And of course, I have too
always do
many slides
things,
because I
cheaply
really
and
like this
quickly
and
like
too
that.
short time, so I have
But
to
the nice thing
speed
about
up.
the app
But my
space
ambition
is that
today
you
is
can create
my
these.
examples that I
The
share
app
with you
economy is basically
should sort of
set up
inspire
as
you and
snacking
connect to your
bite-sized
everyday life and
pieces
say, "Oh,
of
that was
entertainment.
interesting.
And
Maybe
the
if
more
I apply
developers
that in
look
my
at it that
business,
way
I can
and
find
less
this."
about
So
wheeling
what I'm
out these
saying,
really
all of us on
expensive
stage say, if you
projects
add your
that they
everyday
want to
life that,
succeed
you
and
will
need
find
to
new
succeed
solutions. And that's
commercially,
what's interesting
the
with
better, I think.
Sort of new sharing economy. And the second part, of course,
And
is
this one I'm not going to
that
labor
you
too much because I
understand
feel
why
maybe
the Nordics is
it may
such
not
an
be
excellent place for
as
data
relevant
centers,
to
because
you
that's
guys.
the
But this
overall
was
topic for
also
this
something. We get so many. We
But first,
on
a little bit about
the
Telia
agency
Sonera.
side
I'm
of our
not going
business,
to,
which is the
talk
work
too
for
much
hire
about
stuff
it.
that we do.
Used to be,
We get a lot of
formerly
clients
telco
that
incumbents,
come to us
Sweden and
with
Finland
that kind of
merged.
classic
Now
statement,
we're a
which is,
group
we
of,
need an app.
fixed and mobile operators. We have
And like it was
operations
kind
in
of like what
Europe
people were
and
doing
in
15, 20
Eurasia,
years ago
which
with
is
the
interesting
websites,
because there are two
because everyone else has
completely
them,
different
we should have them
scenarios.
too.
And you
And that
can
may
see
well
that
be true,
later on in
but
my
the reasoning is poor.
And we
But
have
they
a
also sort of,
lot of
what's happened
connected,
with apps is they've kind of started
But
to
at the
get
bottom you see
used,
the
the term app has started to get used
very well-kept
as a format.
golden secret
So it's
of
kind
the
of like,
group, Telia
with
Sonera
publishers, we do a lot of work with
International
publishers,
Carrier. Maybe it's because
Penguin,
it's such a long name, no one remembers it. It's
and
difficult to
Hachette
say.
and
We can say
HarperCollins.
TSIC instead.
And they're all really smart
And
people.
we are
And actually now
one
they've
of
got
the top
really
players on
digital
the
savvy
internet
people.
backbone.
But a lot of it was like, okay, there's the
Fibers,
hardcover
end
book,
90s,
there's the paperback,
expanded in
there's the
Europe, and
ebook,
now
and there's the
become
app. And
one
it's
of
like,
the
whoa,
leading
hang on a
players
second
in the
there.
global internet.
The first three are
These
formats.
figures here
The
are
last
actually,
one is a
live
completely
rankings
generic
measured in the
phrase used to
routers
describe software.
in the internet
So it's what
backbone,
kind of app is it?
ranking how many
So when I give you a
customers
book, you know how to use
are
it,
connected
right? It's a
directly to your
format
network.
that we
And
all
that is, of
understand.
course, important because
Okay, I know
direct
how you do this. It
connections
goes, I start here, I go this
And
way.
right now we're actually
If I
top
give you an
two
app,
globally.
you have no
That's
idea
pretty
what to
amazing.
expect. You generally have to learn
Given
whatever
that
that app is
the
going to
internet
present
was
to you.
actually
If it's a
invented in the
game,
US, and of
is it
course the
your
major
email
US
or whatever it
players
is.
have
And so the
always
systems and
dominated
things
this.
involved
So we are on par
are
with
not
one of the
implicit.
big
It isn't a
American players. We
format.
have actually been number
And so
one now,
from an
at
app
least
perspective,
30%
I
of
still
this
maintain,
year so far.
again,
So we're
heavily
catching
skewed
up.
by our experience with kids, in the kids
We're number
market.
2 in Europe,
I still maintain
Africa,
that the app
number 1 in
space
South
is one
America,
of the
really
best
interesting
possible
market, number
channels
4 in Asia.
for reaching the audience, particularly
But
with kids now,
That's the
heavily,
technical
and everyone
presentation.
heavily
So I'm
migrating
more
to
like this
mobile.
one. What
So
we
yes, there
actually
is an
do,
opportunity
of course,
there
is
to
about
reach
fibers
audiences
and
in a way that
routers
wasn't
and
possible before.
connectivity and
Yes, there's an
megabytes
opportunity
and
to
bandwidth.
commercialize
But what we
software
actually
in a
do-
way that there wasn't before with websites. And I still maintain it's trickier to actually create a business model and monetization mechanics around a website than it is around apps. People aren't paying very much for apps, which is bemoaned by a lot of app developers, but at least they're paying more than they are for the average website they visit. The app is not being a strategy and simply just being a particular, broad spectrum and area and possible channel for which you can address. But again, this is something that I feel with you guys. I don't need to labor. Okay. But before I show you this next project, the way it links to this point is that when we talk to a lot of clients, we tend to try and wheel the discussion from there's this app or there's this game we've had in mind, there's a particular customer or age group that we want to try and create something for and engage. And pretty much, not exclusively, but I'd say 90% of the time, we try and bring the discussion around to format, creating a format. It's what I told you about, how much people are willing to pay for stuff. It's been mentioned already in the last talk, which I couldn't agree with more, which is this idea of, okay, perhaps not how can we get everyone to use this system, but certainly how can, as a company, can we build this thing once and then reuse it again and again and again, even if it's for successive clients, whether it's something about reskinning or white labeling stuff. But again, what's better there is it's more profound than just making commercial sense and being efficient. But from a user perspective, the more consistency you have with an experience, the better. Now, you guys, you know this anyway, with books, with every other format that's out there. Customers don't expect a new format every time you give them a new product. And that's kind of what the app space does. It's like, okay, how does this app work? I have to figure it out again. Okay, it's sort of, this one works a little bit like that other game or that other application. And generally speaking, everyone's kind of starting to put, the sort of close up here and the sort of hidden menu system. And there are sort of these kind of standards emerging. But what I think is the case with developers is try and think of a format that then you iterate, and that's all customers want. For example, with lots of games, if all you do, like Angry Birds, if all you do is just put in a different set of characters and skew it and skew it and skew it and skew it, then customers are happy. And I think, again, as a software company, as anyone making this kind of content, it's something that we talk about a lot because it makes common sense, and everyone's like, well, yeah, thanks, that's really enlightening to know that we should be efficient. But I think it's profoundly important. And so this next project is actually unreleased, but it's not under any kind of super secret agreement, so it doesn't matter that I can show you. But it was basically creating a new kind of interactive book format for a publisher. And it's based on a concept that's very familiar, which is the kind of choose your own adventure style. But it's never really been done for picture books. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a fun, playful, choose your own pathway type picture book experience for kids. So I'll show you just a quick video of that in action.
Little Red was on her way to Granny's house when she came upon a wolf. Hello there.
No, not a wolf.
Beanstalk.
Much better. This thing goes on for ages. Oh, cool.
After catching her breath, Little Red decided she should climb back down.
No, she didn't.
So again there, I think hopefully the thing that comes across is it's very familiar, it's very simple. Certain key decisions, creative decisions were made, partly because of their creative and partly because they're commercial. So for example, there's no animation. It is still very much an illustrated picture book experience. In fact, on the surface, the sort of prime interaction is exactly the same as with a picture book. But obviously introducing mechanics that can make it more fun and more interesting. And I actually think that a lot of the time, there's a certain amount of pressure with, particularly where kids are involved as the customer and where adults are involved as creators or designers. There's a certain amount of paranoia about something not being sophisticated enough. It's not interactive enough. There's not enough animation. There's not enough game-like components in it. I basically think that's not true. It's categorically not true in terms of so from my perspective, what my kids enjoy doing, what they get great pleasure out of, the way that they interact with things. It's never this kind of judgment. They'll throw something away because it's not this or it's not that. Now, don't get me wrong. Once you set their expectation level with something, so for example, there was and over the last few years, there's been a sort of glut of picture book apps for kids. And a lot of them kind of occupy this weird space between a game and a book, and it's not one or the other, and they're kind of caught in the middle. And a lot of people think that interactive, non-interactive is like a sliding scale. Like you can just introduce more interactive elements progressively, and you end up somewhere on a scale. And I personally think they're sort of fixed points. I think you have like no animation and animation, and judgments are made on those bases. If you go halfway, it's kind of it's not illustrated picture book. It's not static anymore, so that changes it. But as soon as you move into the interactive realm, then you are going to be compared against other things that are interactive and not as interactive as you, things that are full-blown games, and then you get lots of judgments and behaviors being introduced that can't always be helpful. So the thing here was, very much to try and use established and understood behaviors and try and introduce one little idea. From a publisher's perspective, this is something they understand. We know how to make books. We know how to tell stories. They could see this going, okay, so there's a branching narrative component, but ultimately we know how to do this. And as designers ourselves, we're constantly trying to do this, where we, create as little kind of reinvention of the wheel as possible, because your customers will be thankful for it, and your clients or you will be thankful for it as well. And I think this is one that I've left in here much more from when I'm talking to kind of fellow startups or individuals, anyone who's kind of undertaking their own projects. And it's been a sort of theme today, even in Doug's talk, and I think it's one of those ironies for me, that it's an irony that my respect for someone intellectually always goes up dramatically the first time they say, I don't know something. So that's the weird irony of that situation. And I enjoyed that part of it, immensely at the beginning of his talk, when he was saying, that obviously there's plenty, I don't know this, I don't know that. And it's so true. And one of the things, again, from our experience, that we didn't account for really was just how much time everything takes. How much time it takes to make, how much time it takes to test, how much time it takes to sell. And so again, whilst I feel this might not be totally pertinent to you guys, it was one of the best lessons we learned. And I think in the UK, particularly with the next product I'm going to show you, we certainly, I think it's fair to say we've established ourselves with a cohort of other developers and studios that came up with us over the last 5 years as one of the sort of kids app developer successes, certainly as far as the UK is concerned. And I suppose what's funny about that is that I'm convinced that we're successful simply because we're still around. And I think that I have so many friends, and I know of so many companies that have sort of come and gone even in the last 5 years, particularly in the kids app space. And again, it was said before how the preschool app space from an education perspective is a growth market, but apps is a funny old game. It is by no means a surefire thing, and there are incredible challenges with actually making it a viable commercial business. And there's certainly a huge amount of press and buzz around the sort of gold rush aspect of the app space, particularly with kids. And I think that the one thing you're absolutely going to need is time, and that was certainly true of us. And again, this next project I'm going to show you, again, you can see the trajectory of what we've done. We content is everything. No, not really. Then we went to, okay, so we don't have to spend 700 grand every time we want to actually put a product into the market. So, Sneak was very much a reaction to that. And then it was about format. How can we actually create a format that where it's not so much the technology and the interactive stuff is not the idea. It's what inhabits that's actually the product. And particularly from a storytelling interactive perspective, I think that's true. So that led us very neatly to this next thing that I'm going to show you, which is something called MeBooks. Now, MeBooks it's an app-based ebook shop and reader for kids. It started off with one simple idea where publishers kept on saying to us, ebooks is great, but when it comes to fixed layout picture books, we have problems. Like, why would you take a paper picture book and put it on a touchscreen device? Like, what is the genuinely good reason? And too many examples of that being done. Even if it's nice, you think to yourself, how much more is really happening here than would be happening with the actual book in the first place? So we came up with an idea where you had a fixed layout ebook, and anywhere on the page you can draw an area with your finger around a word, around all of the words, around a character, around a tree, and then by tapping and holding that area you can record and actually tag that area with your recorded audio and voice. We successfully patented that idea, which was astonishing and surprising. But around that one idea, MeBooks literally does nothing more than that. It's an ebook. It has narration and audio built into it, like most ebooks for kids do nowadays. But you can actually re-record and sort of completely repurpose from an audio perspective a book, and then save multiple versions of those stories. Again, it has applications way beyond just stories for kids, some of which we're exploring, but this was the one sort of commercialization of it. Wind on 2 years, and we launched MeBooks as an app where you get a free book, and then you basically access a bookshop and you can buy a lot more. But so we currently work with Penguin Random House, Disney, Nickelodeon, DreamWorks, HarperCollins, Hachette, Scholastic, pretty much the sort of who's who of publishing, certainly color illustrated publishing for kids. This app is kind of very much feels like the sort of accumulated experience of our mistakes. So it's a format that's very recognizable. There's a new interactive component, which is intuitive. There's a very highly sort of iterative concept, which is that there's lots and lots and lots of books that you can buy. So whereas The Land of Me, which eventually became an app, we spent £700,000 to essentially create 4 apps that all cost £1.99. Well, in an afternoon, we can create 4 MeBooks from existing publishing that on average cost £1.99. And it was a lot of these kinds of lessons that we've learned that have arrived here. We've distributed more than 1 million books within the app. It's been downloaded more than 500,000 times. And it's a crazy adventure. But again, this is just a quick video showing you how it works.
How to use your MeBook. Tap to play.
The 3 Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there was a mother pig who had 3 little pigs.
And stop.
Ooh, pigs. My absolute favorite.
Tap this button to see your hotspots.
Oh, look! He's got bricks! I love bricks!
Double tap and swipe to delete. Scroll to create your own hotspots. Hold down to record. Hello there, I'm a pig. Hello there, I'm a pig. Tap to save or reset your MeBook. Swipe vertically from frame to exit.
So actually, based on that story I gave you earlier about adults and kids, the swipe vertically is still there, but we have actually had to add a close button because there's too many parents basically saying, I don't know how to close the book, interestingly enough. So again, it sort of just comes to, how am I doing for time, by the way?
You have like 7 minutes.
Okay, so I'm just coming to the end of it. You dogs, old tricks. And this, you know, I think it comes down to a sort of an observation of, in our experience, pretty much all of the valuable stuff I've learned in the last 5 years that we got wrong, and the stuff that really significantly makes a difference, both creatively in the design process, in the commercial side of things, in our marketing, everything to do with actually making a business out of, you know, creating educational or playful interactive experiences for kids. Pretty much all of it is kind of derived from knowledge or thinking or expertise that's been around for many, 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 many years. It actually feels like the more new stuff we attempt, the more we realize that actually very little changes in terms of how people are. And I think that it becomes kind of overwhelming when you constantly have a rhetoric around the pace of change. Everything's changing. The world's going to be, you know, this, it's going to be that, it's going to be the next thing. And it's this kind of very, you know, this brutal assault on your senses about trying to kind of figure out what that all means. And from a business perspective, constantly being paranoid about, you know, the next this and being sideswiped on your industry not being around tomorrow because Google have released something and it's, you know, completely smashed it, and they probably just released it to see what would happen, and then they close it later, but your business is gone. And there's a lot of sort of anxiety around that. And I think the sort of comforting factor is that the constant being human, and we really, really do not change quickly as creatures. and organisms. And I think our behaviors are what you are actually addressing anyway when you're making stuff. And so I think, yes, there's a huge kind of skew brought on designing interactive experiences based on what you can do. And I've done it myself more than once, but I've seen it so many times. I've seen the user completely out-innovated. It's like, oh, this is, you know, you create something, isn't it marvelous? Users are like, I don't know how to use this, what is it? And I think that there's a certain amount of discipline and skill. And the biggest challenge that I found from a creative perspective, and we still do this now with our design process, is what we leave out is actually more important than what we include. And so with all of our products now, particularly Me Books, that last one that you saw, that's the one that's very much had so like, okay, that's the record thing, yep, that's charming, that's cute. What else does it do? And it's like, no, there are no other features. And I think something like that is the products that are defined by what they don't do. The ability, some of your best features will be what you withheld. That will be your best decision in terms of actually guiding the experience and making it work. And so I think that's you know, as someone, for me, I'm sort of, naturally, I'm a little bit anal, I'm quite exacting, you know, attention to detail and all these sorts of things. And actually what I found is tempering a lot of that in the service of simplicity is actually, it's fairly terrifying, but I think it's utterly crucial to making good stuff. So that's me. I sincerely hope that not knowing kind of in detail what you guys do, that on some level, some of that was interesting and engaging. And if by chance there are any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer them.